Good morning, my friend. Dr. Lee Warren here, coming at you on Self-Brain Surgery Saturday. It is 5 o'clock in the morning, and I am excited to be with you. My voice is not perfect, but it's getting better. I did 5 hours of interviews yesterday. I had 5 different ones. I was on somebody else's podcast, and we had 4 different guests that were scheduled. Because I was sick, I got backed up on all these conversations that we were having for these Hope Talks and another series that we're going to be doing called Everyday Hope that Lisa came up with. And we just had a great day yesterday, but my voice made it. It's not perfect this morning, but I can definitely tell that there's some fatigue from yesterday. And so just keep praying, please, that my voice keeps getting stronger. We got some incredible emails and encouragement from lots of you out there across the world yesterday. One really sweet one was from a woman named Jonna Johnston. We've talked about Jonna on the podcast before, but she sent some text messages that she's been getting from people that she shared the podcast with, and it seems to be helping folks around her circle. So thank you so much, Jonna, and everybody who's sharing the podcast. We're definitely growing. I'll give you some perspective on that. As it stands today, going into the 20th of June, we're at about 42,000 downloads for the month, which before September of last year, that would have been the biggest month we ever had. We were kind of consistently in the high 20s and early 30,000s, high 20 and low 30,000s in monthly downloads before September of last year when I switched to Substack, and it immediately went up solidly into the 40, 50, 60,000 range every month now. So obviously y'all are sharing it. You're posting it, you're getting it out there, and that's the best way to grow this. Don't have advertisers, don't want to do that. I want to keep it where we can completely control the content and talk about what this community needs. And so I haven't ever tried to seek out advertising. So just know that the best way to get hope to somebody else is to share something hopeful for you with them, whether it's a scripture or a book, or even if it's just this podcast. Just sharing it with other people, liking, leaving reviews, that sort of thing is how we grow. And I really appreciate Jonna and all the kind of ambassadors of the podcast that we've developed. And it's just wonderful to have such a community of sharing these positive messages around. Today, I've got the first of what we're going to call Hope Talks. I reached out to the folks who are endorsing the book in clusters. The first group of them have all committed to get on the show and talk about how sort of my treatment plan has helped them and what their thoughts are about hope and some of the hard things that they've been through. And it's going to be a wonderful series. And the first one yesterday was, I'm going to reintroduce you to Clarissa Moll. Clarissa was was on the show for the first time last fall when her book Beyond the Darkness came out. And I don't know if you've heard that or not. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But Clarissa has an incredible story. She lost her husband. She had 4 young kids. It was a tragic accident. And all of a sudden went from being a mom and a wife to being a widow with 4 kids and having to figure out how to feed them and take care of them and become the breadwinner and all that stuff, and just thrust her into this darkness. And she writes this beautiful book that she calls A Gentle Guide for how to recover after big things happen like that in life. And I thought Clarissa would be the perfect first Hope Talk to have about all this, since my book Hope is the First Dose is coming out. And at the end of this conversation, I'm going to give you a brand new song from Matt Mayer and Paul Balash and Taylor Leonhardt called Those Who Have Not Seen. And this song is kind of a look at the doubting Thomas story, when Jesus told Thomas, you're blessed because you've seen, or you believe because you've seen, but blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. So Thomas was blessed because he had faith, but he needed to see proof first. And I relate to that because I have a lot of doubt. After I lost Mitch, I even said it, I don't really think I can believe he's gone until I see him. And then I did see him, and I saw his wounds, and I saw how the coroner had put him back together. And I remember being so angry that I looked at the stitching on his neck, and I thought I could have done that better myself. And it just made me really mad that my son was gone, and that somebody else had sewn up his wounds, and I wasn't there for him. And all these complex emotions happened. And so that metaphor of not believing until I saw it really resonated with me. And Clarissa said something similar in her book after Rob died, when the police came to the campsite to tell her that he had fallen and died. And she said, I don't believe it until I say it out loud myself. Like, she had to sum up the courage to speak out into the world, my husband is dead. And she talks about that beautifully in a very vulnerable way of how it was so hard to come to grips with the reality that he was really gone. And we had a great talk about it yesterday, and just kind of a wonderful talk about how you move forward after the worst thing, the massive thing happens in your life. I think it'll bless you. My voice was better yesterday than it is today, so please thank you for tolerating me this morning. But I really wanted to give you this hope talk with Clarissa Moll. She's a great example of how you can't change your life until you change your mind. Even when you're in the deepest, darkest hole that you can imagine, God will be faithful and he will guide you gently out of that hole. And Clarissa's a great proxy for that, because she gives us a great example of how to do it with great faith. And then at the end of the conversation, we're going to have this wonderful new song, Those Who Have Not Seen, by Paul Baloche, Matt Mayer, and Taylor Leonhardt. And don't forget, my friend, you can't change your life until you change your mind. And the good news is you can start today.
Hey, are you ready to change your life? If the answer is yes, there's only one rule. You have to change your mind first. And my friend, there's a place where the neuroscience of how your mind works smashes together with faith and everything starts to make sense. That place is called self-brain surgery. You can learn it, and it will help you become healthier, feel better, and be happier. And the good news is you can start today.
Thanks, Lisa. Hey, so glad to have you listening today. I'm Dr. Lee Warren, and I live in Nebraska in the United States of America with my incredible wife, Lisa, my father-in-law, Tata, and the super pups, Harvey and Lewis. I'm a neurosurgeon and an author, and I'm here to help you harness neuroscience, the power of your brain, faith, the power of your spirit, and good old common sense to help you lead a healthier, better, happier life. Listen, friend, you can't change your life until you change your mind, and I'm here to help you learn the art of self-brain surgery to get it done. If you like the show, please subscribe so you never miss an episode, and tell your friends about it. If you tell 2 or 3 friends this podcast was helpful to you, imagine how much good we can all do around the world together. I'm Dr. Lee Warren, and I'm here to help you change your mind so you can change your life. Let's get after it. Well, friend, we're back. I'm so excited to be back on the show with my friend Clarissa Moll. Welcome back, Clarissa.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to see you again. And of course, we had you back on the show when your book came out back in October of last year. And I've got my signed copy right here. May reference that a few times during our talk. How are things going these days?
They're going well. Yeah, it's hard to believe that it's been 4 years almost since my husband died. Our lives are very different now, but I can definitely say that they are joyful, and it's complex, but it's also really good.
Wow, that's right. That's exactly right. As time passes, it has got this dual nature, doesn't it, of this thing that never stops and life that keeps going. And so it's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, so tell us, in case somebody hasn't heard your story, I'll set it up, of course, before they hear this part, but tell us a little bit about what happened in your family. You've got 4 kids and life was going great. And what happened?
That's right. Yeah, life was really good. We had just moved across the country for a big promotion for my husband, and he was excited about being in the Boston area, and we took a vacation. And unfortunately, during our vacation, my husband fell to his death, and smack dab in the middle of our vacation. Not anything you ever plan on an itinerary, that's for sure. And it certainly rearranged not just our trip, but our entire lives. So after a month of spending time with friends and family, we headed back home and came back to the rubble of the life that we had known before. And it's really been 4 years of rebuilding together as a team of 5 now, being able to look at these 4 kids and say, not just these are my children, but this is my family, and to re-envision the identity of who we are, and to step with hope and a little bit of trepidation, to be honest, into the path that God has set before us.
Wow. Had you ever had a thought like before that day? Like, had you ever spent much time thinking about what would happen if some big change like that came along in your life? Was it just completely like a new thought to you, or had that been in your mind before?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had a dear friend of mine in college who lost her mom when we were just graduating, and that event really rocked my world. It was the first time that death had come close enough that I could envision someone that I loved dying. not just like grandparents or people that had been in my life in a peripheral kind of way, but someone central to my life. And it was after that that I began to look at my relationships differently. I began to ask myself questions like, what if my husband died? What if my mom or my dad died? What if a death occurred out of the natural order of things? So even though my husband's death certainly was a surprise, it was a sudden loss, it was something that I had thought about. And because of his work, we had talked about too.
Yeah, I mean, your husband. It's ironic. I was going to say funny, but it's not funny. But it's providential. Maybe he had written a book about dying before all that happened, right?
That's right. Yeah, he was a hospice volunteer, and he worked at a funeral home on the night shift. He was a journalist and was reporting on euthanasia and the death with dignity movement, and wanted to really understand how Christians could do this well. Yeah. And so, death was part of our family conversations. And well, as we were raising toddlers and babies, and I didn't like it at all. I thought it was morbid, and I certainly would have preferred other conversations, but that was of interest to him. And he felt really passionate about helping people to understand that the way we live now impacts the way we die, and that understanding our mortality and not running away from it can actually help us to flourish now and live fully.
Wow. So you had intellectually thought about these things, and you and your husband, Rob, had talked about it, he had written about it and all that. But what were some of the internal, you said you had all these what ifs, all these questions that you'd ask yourself. What were some of the answers to those what ifs that you had over the years?
Oh, well, I would say, well, if my husband died, I would stay put. I wouldn't move anywhere. I would continue to homeschool my kids. I would be independent. I would show everybody that I could do this. And there was a real kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of mentality that I had about this, that death wasn't going to do me in. Right. Now, of course, when I met it face to face, that was certainly a different experience. And I realized for the first time in really, I think, my adult life, the necessity of interdependence, the necessity of community, the necessity of flexibility and openness to God's plan, even when it's mystery, and the necessity of holding my own plans with a delicate hand. And so death, when I encountered death, it wasn't as I expected, but I'm grateful for the lessons that I've learned through that experience.
Wow. There's a guy that I wrote about, a patient that I took care of named, I called him Lucky Chuck in the book, and his wife got breast cancer. And I remember him telling me that she said to him before they even knew how bad it was, she said, make your decisions about God and who he is now, because you're going to need him later, and you don't want to be dealing with those big questions when I get really sick and if I die. Decide now. Like, did some of that kind of thing play out for you, like some decisions that you had made about God in the past turn out to be important to you after Rob died?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. 2 years prior, I had actually committed to spending a year in spiritual direction. Wow. And during that year, spent a whole season unpacking the idea of God as Father and God as provider, and learning to love a God I couldn't see, who I had to lean into with a level of trust that honestly I wasn't ready to offer pretty much anybody. And so after Rob died, it was kind of like, okay, this is where the rubber meets the road. Do you actually believe those things about God? Do you believe he can be trusted? Do you believe he can be good to you, even when you have no idea what he's doing? Can you hold on to hope when it feels like everything is hopeless? I am grateful for the way that God initiated that season of spiritual direction, because I do feel in some ways that, hindsight is 20/20, but I see that he was preparing me by drawing me near to him in that way, knowing that I would need his intimate presence really, really badly very soon.
Wow. And during that season, did you learn some new things about God that you hadn't known or encountered before, Clarissa?
Yeah, I think I had always felt like God was kind of a capricious. He would do things randomly. Some people seem to be blessed and other people seem to have a really hard time. There was the person who always seemed to sit in glue, like that, something always bad would happen to them. Why? They seemed like such nice people. I had a real transactional understanding of God that if I would do what was right, things would pan out. That if I obeyed, he'd be faithful. And that year of spiritual direction really blew that idea out of the water that even though I was a parent to 4 children and understood that parenting must come with unconditional love, I really began to tear apart, to dismantle and kind of unravel those unhealthy beliefs about God and step into a reality of a father like the father in the story of the prodigal son, who stood there waiting with no judgment and only grace and mercy, and didn't have a checklist that I had to meet before I was able to be in relationship with him.
Wow. So it's interesting to me. We teach people CPR, and we teach people how to run defibrillators, and we tell people how to change tires, and we prepare ourselves for these things that may not happen, but they might. And we prepare ourselves for all these eventualities, but most people don't really prepare themselves for these big things like losing your husband unexpectedly, having your son stabbed to death unexpectedly. So what's the wisdom that you would share with our listener today? Somebody out there listening who hasn't yet had that big thing in their life, like what little nugget of wisdom could you give them about preparedness that you learned from what you went through?
I think we're inundated with stories of disaster in the media, online, in social media, and we can become kind of numb to that because it's too much for our nervous systems to handle. It's too much for our hearts to handle it. We were never made to carry the weight of the world. And the problem with that numbness is that we become numb to the individual, the local kinds of losses and pain that we actually really experience. So I think the first thing that I would say would be to, stop the buzz of media and simply look around you. Who are the hurting people who are around you? Where, if I look in the mirror myself, where, if I'm honest with myself, am I hurting? And when we start at that hyper local level, we begin to cultivate the skills of empathy and compassion. We learn that there's not a pat answer of thoughts and prayers. It's easy to type that out on social media, but that's super hard to say to your neighbor when she's crying in your arms. You realize you need something more. And I think that kind of hyper local and intimate kind of attentiveness toward the pain in the world allows us to cultivate those fruits of the spirit that we are going to need when something comes and arrives at our doorstep that causes us pain. And I think, it cultivates in us a healthy sensitivity to the problems and the issues that are around us that we can have influence over. And in cultivating that sensitivity, I think it makes us feel a little less powerless when we interact with pain in the broader world.
Wow, that was a good answer. I'm going to listen to that one again. I think that a couple of things you said in there to unpack it. One is this thoughts and prayers things. It's so easy to like somebody's post and say praying for you. How often do we really pray for them? But in this hyper local idea that you just said, like what kinds of things did people say to you shortly after Rob died that were particularly helpful, and what kinds of things were harmful? You talk about that a little bit, and I have some experience with that. What ought we to say in this moment of somebody else's devastating loss? Talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, I'm sorry for your loss. Affirm this world is so broken.
Yeah.
This world is not as it should be. Affirm those truths about the destruction that exists in our world because of sin. I think that's a helpful thing for people to hear when they know it already, but they're feeling it intimately, and to have someone affirm that allows them to feel release, to feel it as deeply as they need to. I think things like I have no words aren't
Yeah.
actually all that helpful because there's a sense of isolation that comes when nobody seems to have anything that they can say to you. And so, I often tell folks just fumble around, stumble words of consolation and say what you can say, apologize when you need to, make eye contact, give a hug. That kind of proximity helps to interpret the words we say. I think that's sometimes why things get messy and muddled with people who are hurting, because we give our consolation from a distance. Get near, get close, get intimate in your relationship so that when you screw up, which eventually you will do, I have thought since my husband died, how many times I said, quote unquote, the wrong thing to someone who was grieving. I'm no pro, but the more you cultivate closeness and intimacy with others, the more that kind of forgiving spirit will exist between you, so that your words come as a balm and not as salt in the wound.
Wow, that's right. And I would just generally advise the listener to delete most of Romans chapter 8 from the early part of your counseling to your friends. Like, don't say this is going to work out for good right after your husband dies, right?
That's right. Yeah. Instead, quote Isaiah 53. He was a man of sorrows and acquainted with pain. He was bruised for us. He was afflicted. There's nothing that a grieving person finds more comfort in than to know that Jesus understands what it feels like to experience what they're experiencing.
That's right. Amen. I realized as my second book, I've seen the interview, was about dealing with people with brain tumors and fatal disease processes. And in the midst of all that is when her son died, when I was writing that book. And I realized that brain cancer is not the deadliest disease that man can encounter. It's hopelessness, right? Yeah. So in the moments after Rob dies and the moments after Mitch dies, and when in these times right after big loss like that, what was it for you that made you say, I'm in this darkness, but I know there's still light out there somewhere? Like, what was it for you that gave you the gumption to keep looking for the light again?
Yeah. Well, I've got to tell you, Lee, when I read that in your book, I thought, wow, I don't want to get that disease. Yeah. I mean, I think that was the thing that struck me very soon after Rob died, that I was faced with a decision. I was faced with a decision of choosing to walk toward hope or giving up altogether, despairing altogether, because there were so many people who said, I can't imagine what this would be like. And yes, it was my worst nightmare. And I am not a rose-colored glasses person. I believe in talking about death with real words and honoring how hard it is. But each of us has a choice, because hopelessness is a preventable illness.
That's right.
And
I'm going to steal that.
It is not incurable. And so even if you feel like you've self-diagnosed hopelessness, as it were, after a period of deep pain or something really difficult, it's not the end. There is a cure. And so I think that was, for me, that realization of, I feel hopeless right now because of what has happened in my life, and I am utterly in the dark. But this isn't the end of me. I would say to myself, Rob has died, but I am not dead too. That's right. And that was something that sometimes I had to say it until I believed it. But it was that repetition that determined one foot in front of the other, knowing that God's promises were true in the valley as well as on the mountaintops. Believing that hopelessness didn't have to be my final diagnosis.
That's right. I teach people this little concept that we call self-brain surgery, because I'm a brain surgeon. So have to come up with something that works for my workflow. But the first tenet of it is feelings aren't facts. Like feelings are chemical events in your brain. And sometimes they point towards things that are true. Often they don't. And when you had that feeling, it feels hopeless, but it's really not. There's a path. There's a way to get back to the light. I think that's so important. So talk to us now. So you're 4 years into this journey, and you've got 4 kids, and this grieving mother. At some point, you made a decision to start trying to help other people who were hurting too. And your Instagram is a beautiful example of that. By the way, and I'll put your Instagram handle on the show notes. But you're always teaching us, like even your book, the subtitle is a gentle guide to living with grief and thriving after loss. So when was the switch for you to I'm not going to just do this alone. I'm going to help other people too. And has that turned out to be more helpful to you than you thought it might be?
Certainly, it has turned out to be more helpful than I thought it would be. When I began writing after Rob's death, I wrote mostly just to tell friends and family how we were doing, because none of them had ever experienced the loss of a husband at a young age with young children at home. And they genuinely didn't know how to take care of us. And they were honest about that. And I appreciated their honesty. And the worst thing is to cast a grieving person in the role of educator, having to educate those around them. And yet, how are we going to do this better unless we have somebody who's willing to say, okay, I'll go first. I'm going to tell you how hard this is and the pitfalls that I run into. I'm going to tell you about my successes and my failures. I'm going to tell you what hurts when you say it and what really helps. We need somebody who's willing to step forward and do that, or else we're just going to stay stuck in the mire of, pat answers and mythology that doesn't really serve us well. Wow. And so when I began to do that for my family and friends and realized, my burden is actually lessened by inviting them into my story. Yeah. What if everybody's burdens could be lessened if they had someone to carry it with them, someone who knew how to carry that burden with them? And out of that, grew a work in bereavement advocacy that has been so refreshing to me, because I see other people begin to share their burdens with others and find that they're met not with distance or isolation, but with willing helpers. And that really gives me hope.
That's amazing. So, that the feeling I get, feelings aren't facts, but the feeling I get when I read your post, it's, you can tell you're a mother. Like you have this sort of, this guiding leader, sort of trustworthy guide kind of feel to your posts. And I realized at some point, like you had to have made a decision. Like, I know that I have navigated this path, this little piece of the path that I'm on, in a way that could be helpful to others. And I'm going to throw them out enough breadcrumbs so they can find their way too. That's what it feels like when you read your work. And so congratulations on doing that. It's just extremely helpful and important.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, what we do, you and I, is we speak from the pain that we have, that has befallen us. But I really believe that none of it is wasted. And not that we see, not in a transactional way, that we see these fruits of our pain played out in our lives, but that in God's mysterious kindness, He is doing work in us. And I believe that for each grieving person, that, you in your situation may not have the wherewithal to get out of bed, let alone tell anybody else how, how it is to grieve. But you can believe that even in the midst of that darkness, that God is working. God hasn't abandoned you. He hasn't abandoned the plan that He has for your life, that is good and gracious. And, that's the position that we all are in. I think, Ram Dass says we're all just walking each other home, and that's kind of how it feels.
That's right. I love that. I mean, for me, and Lisa and our family, we kept running into these people shortly after Mitch died who had been through something like that and it became their whole life. Like these folks that got stuck in support groups for 20 years and never were able to move past, or these people that were wrecked and emotionally destroyed. And we sat down one day and we were like, this has to be an and not a but. And our, it can't be, we were okay, but Mitch died, or we were happy, but this happened. And it had to be and, like, because that's never, Rob's never going to come back and Mitch is never going to come back. And you have 4 kids and you're young and you've got a life to live and all that stuff. And so for us, it has to be this quantum physics thing where these two things can be true at the same time. And, we can grieve and we can never be over that. But now we have something else too that we have to live. And so seeing that play out in people is really inspiring. And you're doing that. And I want you to just tell us now, like 4 years into this thing, what's your life look like now? And give us a little piece of what it can look like when somebody grabs onto hope and keeps going. What does it look like now?
Sure. Well, I think I could tell you all of the things that were sort of material. I'm engaged to be married again.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Excited about the merging of families. I have a job I love. My children are well adjusted. But I think there's a danger in sharing those kinds of things as markers of sort of success after loss, because everybody's story looks different. And whether it is a woman who lost her husband who chooses not to marry again or doesn't have the opportunity to marry again, certainly that's not a defining feature of what it means to have moved forward with your loss.
That's right.
And so I prefer to think about that moving forward as something that God is doing inside of me and inside of each grieving person as they make those steps toward hope, however faltering they may be. Do I find that I trust God with my circumstances more? Yeah, I do. Do I find that I'm more willing to listen to his wisdom rather than follow my own? Yeah, I do. Do I worry less about the future and spend far more time investing in now? Yeah, I do. Yeah. And so when I think about those kind of character developments, have I developed more peace? Am I more patient? Am I more forgiving? Then I can say, all right, I think grief has done its work in me, or grief is doing its work in me and will continue to do it. And I think those are sort of benchmarks that anybody can meet as they desire to move toward hope, to seek after a more forgiving spirit.
Yeah.
And when you notice that in yourself, celebrate it. This is grief's work in me. This is what God is doing in me to transform my loss into purpose. I think those things are far better markers than the sort of external things that we often describe when we talk about moving on after loss.
Oh, that's right. That's that promise from James about when he says, rejoice when you encounter suffering because it's going to produce some stuff. It's another one of those verses not to throw at people early. But when you look at it in retrospect, right, it's true. Like you've been refined. Isaiah said, I've been refined in the furnace of suffering. And that's true. I mean, I'm a less controlling, less stressed out neurosurgeon type guy, and my dogs are coming to say hi. Hey guys. I'm less of that stuff than I was before. And that's a refining process that you can't have if you don't go through something hard. Like most people don't get really spiritually formed in a life of ease and good outcomes, right? We are formed by pain. So that's a great point that you made. I guess the last thing I would ask you is sort of, you're still writing, right? You're not just a one book author. What are you working on now?
So I've got 3 books coming soon. I have yes.
An underachiever, huh?
I've got a book for teens, grieving teens, after a COVID epidemic where more than 500,000 children in the United States lost a parent or a primary caregiver. There's certainly a great grief that hangs as a cloud over a lot of children now. And certainly youth mental health statistics, the U.S. Surgeon General's report last year was pretty bleak. So I'm excited about that resource for Grieving Teens. I've got a devotional coming out to guide folks through 40 Days in the Wilderness experience of loss. Wow. And then I'm super excited about a children's picture book that I have introducing really young children to the language of loss, helping them to understand that all the ways we grieve as humans are God's amazing capacity built into us to honor what is lost and to hold on to hope.
Wow, that's amazing. So be sure and let me know when those are coming out. I'd be happy to have you back on the show and help folks get to know about your books. And so in a shameless plug for my book, tell us just, did you learn anything from Hope is the First Dose that you think will be helpful to other people?
Yes. Yeah, I think that, your stories fascinate me. And I love to see how God designed us for the kinds of things he places before us. And so, as I read your book, I was struck once again by how fearfully and wonderfully made we are, not just for resilience, but for resurrection too. And that we have hope written in our bones.
That's right.
And so for the person who has experienced something difficult, you step forward and you remind us of who we are, not just who we are inside in our hearts and our spirits, but who God has actually formed us to be as people. And he's given us all the tools we need to be able to meet the challenges that we face and not just cling to hope, but eventually link arms and walk confidently again with hope. And your book certainly offers that to readers.
Thank you. That's great hearing that from somebody like you that's taught me so much about hope and faith. And just give us one last little somebody who's in the early days, like what do you say to the darkest moment of somebody's life? What does Clarissa Moll have to say to us today about what to do next?
I would say to that person the prayer that I encouraged my daughter to pray this morning as we were sitting at the pediatrician's office, getting ready for that ever-feared vaccination appointment. Yeah. Said, we're going to breathe in and we're going to say, Jesus is with me. And then we're going to breathe out and we're going to say, Jesus keeps me safe. Wow. And that just quiet breathing in, Jesus is with me, and breathing out, Jesus will keep me safe. I think it engages our minds, it engages our bodies, and it reminds us the truth that this man of suffering knows us and will never abandon us in these darkest days.
Amen. Beautiful. Clarissa Moll, so good to see you again. Thank you for your time today.
Oh, it's great to talk to you, Lee.
What a wonderful conversation. She's just so full of life and hope, and she's getting remarried, and just God is being good to her, and she's a great guide. Listen, if you're not following Clarissa on Instagram, she's just got a wonderful channel of encouraging thoughts and ideas about recovery from grief and stepping into the new future that God has got for you. And it's a great channel you should follow. And I encourage you highly to read her book, Beyond the Darkness. If you're dealing with something hard, it's very, very helpful. And I'm so grateful that Clarissa read and has endorsed. She's one of my jacket endorsers for Hope is the First Dose. And I just want you to remember, friend, when the massive thing happens, there is a treatment plan. There is a path to recovery. God will give you the ability to find the light again. There's a way forward. There's a treatment plan. And hope is the first dose.
See from his head, his hands and his feet, sorrow and love flow mingle down. Did have such love and sorrow me, or thorns composed so rich a crown. I've never seen you, but I believe you. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe.
I have my doubts, but you have my heart. Walk with me, Jesus, through the dark. I carry these burdens, it's heavy I feel, but just say the word and I'll be healed. I've never seen you, but I believe you. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. I've never seen you, but I believe you. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. My Lord, my God, my Lord, my God, I believe in you. My Lord, my God, my Lord, my God, I believe in you. Oh, I believe. My Lord, my God, my Lord, my God, I believe in I've never seen you, but I believe you. Blessed are those who have not seen. I've never seen you, blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe.
Hey, thanks for listening. Please subscribe to the show so you automatically get every episode. And if you like the show, you'll love my weekly letter. Check out my writing at drleewarren.substack.com, drleewarren.substack.com. Get the free newsletter every week for my best prescriptions for becoming healthier, feeling better, and being happier through the power of faith and neuroscience smashing together via self-brain surgery. drleewarren.substack.com. And if you need prayer, go to the prayer wall at wleewarrenmd.com/prayer. The theme music for the show is Make Us One by Tommy Walker, graciously provided for free by the great folks over at TommyWalkerMinistries.org. Check it out and consider supporting them. TommyWalkerMinistries.org. Remember, you can't change your life until you change your mind. And the good news is you can start today. I'm Dr. Lee Warren. I'll talk to you soon. God bless you, friend. Have a great day.